The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law. They were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendment of the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being in springtime. It was in that clammy month that the H.G. men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. It was tragic, all right, but George and Hazel could not think about it very hard. Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, he had to wear a little mental handicap and radio in his ear. He was required by law to wear it at all times. It was tuned into a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas. The buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic, like bandits from a burglar alarm.
That was a real nice dance they just did.
Huh?
The dance. It was nice.
Yep.
He tried to think a little bit about the ballerinas. They weren't really very no good better than anybody else would have been anyway. They were burdened with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked so that no one, seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face, would feel like something that cat drug in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 out of the 8 ballerinas. Hazel saw him wince. Having no mental handicap herself, she had to ask George what the latest sound had been.
Sounded like a milk bottle being hit with a ball-peen hammer.
I think it'd be interesting to hear all those different noises, all the thoughts they think up.
Oh.
I'd make a good handicap general. If I was DM Moon Clampers, I'd have chimes every Sunday, kind of a religious thing.
I'd be able to think if it was just chimes.
Well, maybe really loud chimes. I'd make a good handicapper general.
Right?
Well, who knows what normal was better than me?
Right.
He began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son, who was now in jail, about Harrison, but a 21-gun salute in his head stopped that.
All of a sudden you look so tired. Why don't you just stretch out on the sofa so you can rest the handicap bag on the pillow, honey bunch?
She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck. Go on and rest the bag.
Go on and rest the bag for a little while. I don't care if you're not equal for me. For a little while. Whoa, that one was a doozy.
It was such a doozy that George was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rims of his red eyes. 2 of the 8 ballerinas had collapsed to the studio floor and were holding their temples.
All of a sudden you look so tired. Why don't you just stretch out on the sofa so as you can rest your handicap bag on pillows, honey bunch?
She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck.
Go on and rest the bag for a little while. I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while.
George weighed the bag with his hands.
I don't mind it. I don't notice it anymore. It's just a part of me.
You've been so tired lately. kind of worn out. If there was just a way we could make a little hole in the bottom of the bay and take out a few of the lead balls, just a few.
"2 years in prison and a $2,000 fine for every ball I took out. I don't call that a bargain."
If you could just take out a few when you come home from work. I mean, you don't compete with anyone around here. You just sit around.
"If I tried to get away with it, then other people would get away with it. And pretty soon, we'd be right back to the Dark Ages again, with everyone competing against everybody else. You wouldn't like that, would you?"
I'd hate it.
There you are. The minute people start cheating on laws, what do you think happens to society?
I reckon it would just fall apart.
What would?
Society. Wasn't that what you just said?
Special news bulletin.
Ladies. That's alright. He tried. That's the big thing. He tried his best with what God gave him. He should get a big raise for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me. Harrison Bergeron, age 14, has just escaped from jail, where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He is a genius and an athlete. He is under handicap and should be regarded as extremely dangerous.
I am the Emperor! Do you hear? I am the Emperor! Everybody must do what I say at once. Even as I stand here, crippled, hobbled, and sickened, I am a greater ruler than any man who ever lived. Now watch me with what I can become and what I can become.
Harrison tore the straps of a handicap harness like wet tissue paper. Tore straps guaranteed to support 5,000 pounds. Harrison's scrap iron handicaps crashed to the floor. Harrison thrust his thumbs under the bar of the padlock that secured his head harness. The bar snapped like celery. Harrison smashed his headphones and spectacles against the wall. He flung away his rubber ball nose, revealed a man that would have awed Thor, the god of
I
fire.
shall now select my Empress. Let the first person who stands up and claim her mate and throne.
A moment passed. Then a ballerina arose, swaying like a willow. Harrison plucked the mental handicap from her ear, snapped off her physical handicaps with marvelous delicacy. Last of all, he removed her mask. She was blindingly beautiful.
Now, shall we show the people what the meaning of dance is? Music!
Silly. False. But Harrison snatched 2 musicians from their chairs, waved them like batons as he sang the music as he wanted it played. He slammed them back into their chairs. The music began again and was much improved. Harrison and his Empress merely listened to the music for a while, listened gravely as though synchronizing their heartbeats with it. They shifted their weights to their toes. Harrison placed his big hands on the girl's tiny waist, letting her sense the weightlessness that would soon be hers. And then, in an explosion of joy and grace, into the air they sprang. Not only were the laws of the land abandoned, but the law of gravity and the laws of motion as well. They reeled, whirled, swiveled, flounced, capered, gambled, and spun. They leaped like deer on the moon. The studio ceiling was 30 feet high, but each leap brought the dancers nearer to it. It became their obvious intention to kiss the ceiling. They kissed it, and then, neutralizing gravity with love and pure will, they remained suspended in air inches below the ceiling. And they kissed each other for a long, long time. It was then that Deanna Moon Glampers, the handicapper general,
the handicap general, came in to the studio with a double-barreled 10-gauge shotgun. She fired twice at the Emperor and the Empress, who were dead before they hit the floor. Deanna Moon Clampers loaded her gun again. She aimed it at the musician and told them that had 10 seconds to get their handicaps back on.
You got 10 seconds to get your handicaps back on, buddy.
George came back in with the beer, paused while a handicap signal shook him up, and then he sat down again.
You've been crying.
Yup.
What about?
I forget. Something real sad on television.
What was it?
It's all kinds of things mixed up in my mind.
Forget sad things.
I always do.
That's my girl.
He winced. There was a sound of a riveting gun in his head.
Gee, that one was a doozy.
You could say that again.
Gee, that one was a doozy.